Lasting Affordability in Housing Now, to achieve 1 million new affordable housing units, has launched new initiatives and strategic partnerships with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the Colorado Health Foundation, Mayor Memorial Trust, and NeighborWorks America. I call him the serene storm, unflappable, humble, with a lot of humility. He continues to teach and lead us, always focusing on the communities we serve. Please help me welcome Mr. Tony Pickett to the podium.
Thank you so much, Hala, for all of that. You know, you make me emotional, so bear with me. First of all those things that you said, I couldn't have done any of that without all of the people in this room. And I want to say welcome to Washington, D.C. You all 450 registered participants, you are the foundation of all of the good things that Grounded Solutions is doing. So I just want to kind of spend my time before I introduce our keynote speaker appreciating so many of you. You really represent the full range of our Grounded Solutions Network partners and allies, and more than 260 members today. So give yourselves a hand. I also want to recognize our champion members, and if those of you who are with those organizations will stand up when I read them off. At the roof level, the City of Seattle, the Champlain Housing Trust. At the door level, the Atlanta Land Trust. Yes, that's you, Michael Monti. The South Baltimore Community Land Trust, the Douglas Community Land Trust, and the Elevation Land Trust. Thank you for being champions. I also want to acknowledge that we have a special new membership level this year, our Lasting Affordability Partner Circle. And the very first member of that group is the National Cooperative Bank. So Casey Fannin here, thank you. I also want to welcome all of the new members, all the returning members, because you and your support are making the work happen on the ground every day. And I know that's harder every single day. So I just want to appreciate the fact that whether you are a community land trust, a local government inclusionary program, a limited equity co-op, a habitat, a resident-owned community program, a financial institution, an advocacy group, a coalition, a research organization, and the list goes on, all of you individual professional consultants as well. Thank you for everything that you're doing to drive the work forward, because it's our vision to produce 1 million homes with lasting affordability over a 10-year period. Our audience today also includes several of our current funders and sponsors who have continually supported the work, and I just want to have you all join me in specifically appreciating them as well. Our title sponsors who made this event possible include the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Millville Charitable Trust. Our patron sponsors, Land Home Financial and NeighborWorks America. I'm not going to go through that full list. We're going to sprinkle those in as the days go on, but I just want to give those folks a shout out at this particular time. I also want to thank our entire Grounded Solutions Network board, who are doing a phenomenal job. Couldn't do it without their guidance and support. So if they would just stand, and let's give them a round of applause, because they're volunteering and they do a fantastic job. And last but not least, my staff team. If you've been following the evolution of Grounded Solutions Network, we have a bigger staff now than we have ever had at any point in Grounded Solutions history. And it is really their hard work and dedication that is solving your problems, creating resources and tools that you need, making peer-to-peer connections every day. That's not me, that's them. every day. And I just want to give them a round of applause for putting together such a wonderful event for us. I see a bunch of them standing around. Hopefully they'll come in and take a seat as well, but thank you to my staff team. I just want to give a little bit of framing to the first of our series of 3 really powerful plenary speakers. And I just want to acknowledge, I know these times are intense and increasingly challenging. Opposition and threat to our values is growing, but together we can overcome all of that. We've done it many times. We come from a history and a tradition of overcoming obstacles. Those of you who saw the Arc of Justice film last night, you know what I'm talking about. You know what that story looks like. We are committed to opposing, resisting, and overcoming whatever the obstacles are to make the work happen for the communities and the families that we care about. And we're going to continue to do that. Some of us, thank you. Some of us are going to organize and participate in peaceful protests. Some of us are going to be advocating behind the scenes to build bipartisan relationships, to provide vital support and influence the policy decisions and to mitigate the challenges that are being proposed. All of that and much more is going to be needed. And again, we're going to be counting on all of you when we put out the call. And I just want to acknowledge our friends and our partners at NeighborWorks. We put out a call for them a few weeks ago, and many of you answered that, and it's making a difference, so thank you for doing that. I also want to urge everyone to really focus and reflect on understanding that the burden of patience in a long march to racial justice and equity, that's what it takes. And some of you may recall that was partially the title of a 2020 essay that I authored that was published by the International Center for Community Land Trusts. And I just want to share a few thoughts from that with you that I think are particularly applicable to the gathering that we're having this week. Progress in our growing work, I've come to understand, like our nation's prolonged and grudging progress toward racial justice, will neither come rapidly nor easily. We should position our own collective work as being a component and a continuation of a broader struggle for new national policies and programs aimed at achieving progressive social, political, and economic changes that directly address the ongoing impact of racism. The Community Land Trust was first envisioned by leaders who conceived and pioneered the model as a complement to other political and economic strategies for advancing the broader goals of the civil rights movement. And I just want to connect this place that we're in to that movement. I learned this just this week. This very hotel hosted leaders of the civil rights movement during the March on Washington. So we've had this conference in this hotel. I've never known that until this week. So feel that energy when we're having these discussions and you're in this place along with me. Again, the arc of justice is never completely a forward motion. It's a pendulum, it goes back and forth. We just have to keep pushing it in the direction we want it to go in. The proven facts of history teach us that moral, social, and legal progress typically occurs at a pace none of us can fully predict, much less control. So I'm just going to leave you all with that. Next, I'll move on to introducing our keynote speaker. I'm very pleased, Santhosh Ramdoss. He's the president and CEO of Gary Community Ventures. He also serves as the organization's chief investment officer, overseeing the endowment and helping to deploy a larger pool of financial assets in service to its mission. As a result of his leadership, Gary has established partnerships with leading impact fund managers and companies while incubating capital vehicles like the Deerfield Fund for Black Wealth, which offers vital down payment assistance to Black home buyers in Metro Denver. Before Gary, Santhosh was part of the investment teams at both the Skoll and the Michael and Susan Dell Foundations. He also has experience as a community organizer, startup entrepreneur, and community banker. He's also proud of his identity as an immigrant and leverages his personal experiences to inform his commitment to equity. So please join me in giving a very warm, Grounded Solutions welcome to Santhosh Ramdoss.
Thanks, Tony. Can you all hear me? Is the microphone working? Awesome. All right, we're going to start with a bit of an exercise. I want you all to take a moment and look around the room you're in. Indulge me in this. Look at the walls for a minute. Look at the ceiling. Look at this beautiful chandelier. Take in the space we're in. Also look around the people that you're sitting in the table with. Feel the ground under your feet. Yes, thank you. I appreciate all of you all doing that. And feel the ground under your feet for a minute, whether you're sitting or standing. And those of you who are sitting, please come join us. It's going to be fun. I promise you I will try to keep it fun. And this feels like a meditation exercise. Possibly something could be a breathing exercise at this point in time. And knowing the world we're in, and knowing this moment that we're in this nation, and being in the nation's capital, trust me, we all could calm our nervous systems down. It's probably something we need. In fact, I think the Grounded Solutions team probably thought about bringing in a meditation teacher or a Buddhist monk. Unfortunately, you're stuck with this dude. I'm sorry about that. I will also, side note, say that I had a prepared speech, and I was going to deliver that, and I thought there was going to be a teleprompter. Turns out that's not an option. And so I'm just going to wing it, and I'm just going to say I've never done a keynote in front of these many people before, so preemptively, I'm asking you for your kindness. Thank you. Put it out there. There's something else I also want you to notice, things that you can't see in this room, right? Like the air that we breathe. It kind of permeates this room. We take it for granted. It sustains life. The gravitational forces that hold us down that we can't feel, we can feel it. What if I told you there's another illusion in this room? It permeates every corner of this room. It permeates every corner of this hotel, this city, this block, this country, the nation as a whole. It's been an illusion that's about 400 years in the making, and it's the foundation of the capital system we live in. And the best way to understand that illusion is actually to start with this hotel, right? I don't know how many of you all are staying here. It's got the name Hilton in front of it. You kind of walk in, and the natural assumption that you would have is that the hotel is owned by Hilton, right? It's very obvious. I know some of you are real estate investors like, no, that's not true. We'll get there, right? The slide came up too quickly. But thank you, Joseph. Appreciate it. Awesome. Well, I went down a rabbit hole of figuring out who actually owns it, because turns out Hilton's just a fresh coat of paint. It's like a brand you can borrow. It's like a membership program. They actually don't own any of the real assets. They don't own the land. They don't own the property. They don't own the history in a way. They just, tomorrow this could be a Marriott or something else, right? It's just a brand. And so I'm like, I'm going to figure out who owns this place, because it's, I'm doing a talk on Q ownership, right? And so I need to figure out who owns the property. So I got on this thing, and I'm pretty good at Google searching. So I spent like about 3 hours on this, and I go layer by layer, and this is not the answer I came up with, by the way. I could not find out who owns this hotel. I kid you not. I challenge any of you all to just go online right now and figure out who owns this property, the physical property, the land. And so what I did was the thing I do these days, is I went to the most advanced AI model available. So yes, trust me, this is crazy. I went to Gemini 2.5 Pro, Google's most advanced model, and I said, hey, I want to figure out who owns the Hilton Hotel. And these models have this thing called deep research. I don't know if you all have looked at it. You give it a question, and it goes and thinks like a human for about 45 minutes. And in the process, it reads the entire internet. And so Google search went through about 800 websites, starting with DC land records to SEC filings. It just read the whole internet. And then it created this beautiful graph for me after about 45 minutes. It did. And I do feel bad wherever Google's data centers are. I'm sure maybe in rural Texas, some of those homes may have lost power during that time. I apologize in advance for those of you. But what was fascinating to me is this underlying idea of like how obvious it is for us to think about ownership, but it's not so obvious in the world that we've constructed. And this is what I start talking about as an illusion, because under the structures of multiple LLCs, apparently, we get to finally like a real estate investment trust, 2 of them, in fact. And those real estate investment trusts are publicly listed, and they have hundreds of thousands of shareholders, including large investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard. Surprisingly so, some of you all who have 401k accounts or IRAs may have some ownership in this hotel. Did you know that walking in? A tiny bit, like a minuscule ownership, right? There's a Dutch pension fund that owned part of the hotel. Think about a number of Dutch pensioners who came here and said, oh, I didn't know I owned this hotel, right? It's kind of absurd to think about how we built this. And there's also a whole lot of others we don't know about. There's like a Middle Eastern investment firm that's got an office in Cayman Islands that owns a piece of it. And you start to see how you close your eyes and kind of imagine anywhere in America, and you start to see everything that is an asset, a piece of land, a property, has layers and layers and layers of ownership. And all of that accrues in the hands of those that have the capital to invest. And so many of the folks that own a piece of this property, who accrue wealth from it, who accrue value from it, have never, ever stepped into this piece of land. Take that account for a minute. And we've created this illusion where, and I call it an illusion because it is true, and it permeates not just this room, because it is extractive in nature. The idea is to not tell you who owns this, because if you do find out, you're going to be angry. You're going to find out and ask why the people who've been working here for 2 decades, who've been cleaning the rooms, who've been checking you in, who've been making your cappuccinos, don't get to benefit from the upside we've created. We don't want to tell you that. We just want to make you assume that Hilton owns it, or somebody who's really nice owns it, the person who greeted you at the door owns it. But the answer is not that. The answer is, how do we create this structure that makes it as hard as possible to figure out who actually owns it, and in that process, we create a structure that can be as extractive as possible. And this is a deep extractive legacy, and to me, this always reminds me of the movie Matrix. How many of you all have watched the movie Matrix? Okay, good number, right? It's from the 90s, I think. Now I'm going to date myself. And the premise of the movie is that humans have been taken over by robots. We live in this weird futuristic world where the Earth has been destroyed. And we're essentially batteries that power the robotic future. But we all live in a beautiful illusion. So our lives are as perfectly as they are right now, but it's kind of an illusion. And there's a movie where Morpheus, convinces Keanu Reeves to take a pill, and he takes a pill, and then he suddenly starts seeing the Matrix. And the world looks really different. It looks dramatically new, and you start seeing, and there's a beautiful scene where he sees zeros and ones everywhere, right? And that's kind of how I feel this moment is. If you kind of close your eyes and imagine this particular room, you start seeing the layers and layers of wealth that gets extracted. And intentionally so, we're leaving behind folks that are creating and generating value in these assets that we own across this country, and this permeates every piece of this. We have securitized anything that can be securitized in this country. And so it made me wonder, how do we get here? And part of my wonder got to me to the fact that this is part of the founding of this nation. When our settler colonists came here, they had a clear view of the world. They had their version of the Matrix. They did not want to tell anyone. They walked into this beautiful piece of land, and they saw fences everywhere. They saw individual property. They saw something that can be securitized, indemnified, broken into pieces, sold and bought. And our indigenous communities had a love of land that was about communal, collective beauty and belonging that was ruptured and taken away. And once they figured out they could access this beautiful, incredible piece of land, then they pushed all of them away, committed some of the most atrocious facts we can imagine, primarily to capitalize on that land and make it into a securitizable asset. Once they did that, they realized they could securitize people. And so we had the most aggressive capitalistic enterprise that was chattel slavery in terms of owning and commoditizing people that we created as an American system. And that created further deep, profound pain, and then came the idea of corporations. And if you think about back in 1800s, the idea of corporations were essentially meant to be an institution of public good. They were not meant to be places of concentrated ownership. But then somebody figured out that they could take that same part of law and say we could just make sure that people who have the capital can own pieces of property, but also pieces of companies. And we created this deep, collective, concentrated structure of equity ownership within companies. And that created further wealth divides of VC, where you could have workers who can work in an enterprise for their entire lifetime and still cannot see a single penny of capital upside that they would benefit from, or at the same time, people who had capital can benefit from it. And then comes the story that you all are very familiar with, which is we figured out that housing is also a securitizable asset, right? We decided that we could sell by, but also we said we will exclude, we will prevent people from buying in certain neighborhoods. We'll make sure some neighborhoods are more valuable. If the neighborhood's more valuable, we will not let you build more housing there. And even today, this is true that we go into communities of color and said we will create an affordable housing unit here, and yet we know that the upside from that unit does not go back to the communities that live there right now and own the land, right? We figured this how to do it. And again, every one of those units, close your eyes, you get one of these. I'm not kidding. You will probably get one of these, which is a complex ownership structure that is hard to break it down. And so it's like a system that we've constructed, we live in, we breathe it, we don't question it, we don't want to because it's too scary. We just take it for granted, we go on with our lives. And the answer to me sometimes is we should burn it all down. Like, this system is broken. Yeah. It's the foundation of capitalism, right? We just put it aside and create a new world. Turns out it's not that easy. And I trust me, I have the temptation too. Like, I feel like, oh God, this is like, how do you fight this? You fight it with fire. You fight fire with fire. You start playing with the system that has broken us down and start breaking down the system. And you start hacking into it a little bit and understanding what the rules are, understanding complex ownership structures, and trying to see how you can break it down to actually benefit folks that have created value or creating value here. So I want you to come along with me on a little bit of a detour. This involves a couple of movie clips. How many of you have watched the movie Air? Okay, 4 or 5, thank you. You're gonna love it, awesome. It's a movie about Nike, the company. Yeah, and some of you remember now, right? It's the Michael Jordan story, but it's actually the story of Nike falling apart and needs really desperately Michael Jordan to sign on board and be a sponsor, and they create this shoe line called Jordans, which are like pretty phenomenal and the largest selling shoe line in the history of shoes, I guess, or Nike's history. And the movie is exceptional because it talks through the story of how this happens in the eyes of the Nike executives. And there's a particular scene that doesn't get talked about. It's profoundly important for this moment. And the preview I want to give you before I play the scene is that this is a phone call between Matt Damon and Viola Davis. Viola Davis is Dolores Jordan, was Michael Jordan's mom. Matt Damon is Sonny Vaccaro, who's the Nike executive. And the phone call, she's calling him to say, we will take the deal because Michael Jordan really wants to go with Adidas, and they're worried, and they've been fighting really hard. And so she says, yes, we will take the deal under one condition, and the condition is that we will get a share of every shoe that is being sold. So that's the scene. I'm going to cut to it, and we'll come back to it. Joseph, can we pull the clip?
Michael will get a percentage of the revenue of the sale of each shoe that is sold.
I'm sorry?
Not all Nike shoes, just the ones with his name on them.
Oh, well, Mrs. Jordan, so that's not how the business works at all. I mean, I understand the assumption, but the athletes get a licensing fee. In this case, obviously, a groundbreaking fee, but they don't actually participate in the gross sales of the shoe. I mean, because Nike's a public company, so that they can't. That would disrupt the industry, and they wouldn't. There's a whole other set of economics around this. It's very complicated.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite complicated.
Realistic, but this way it's cleaner because you know, and the family knows exactly what's going to come in every year.
Thank you. There's actually one more clip. Could you pull the other clip too, and we'll come back to.
You eat, we eat. That's all he's asking.
That's a fair point, but that's just not how business works. I mean, they invest the capital and they get the reward, and that's how it goes.
Well, maybe that needs to change. Because if he does what I think he's going to do, what you also think he's going to do, and what Michael knows he's going to do, then it won't be the NBA promoting my son. I promise you, it'll be the other way around. And in that case, he deserves a piece.
Mrs. Jordan, I understand what you're saying. I actually agree with you. But that's just not how it goes in this life. People like your son, people who work for a living, they don't let us own anything. We take the best we can get. And this is a great deal. This is the biggest deal this company has ever offered anyone, by far. Michael could blow out his knee next week.
Mr. Vaccaro, I agree that the business is unfair. It's unfair to my son. It's unfair to people like you. But every once in a while, someone comes along that's so extraordinary that it forces those reluctant to part with some of that wealth to do so not out of charity, but out of greed, because they are so very special. And even more rare, that person demands to be treated according to their worth because they understand what they are worth.
Could we pull this out and I'll come back to it, sorry. So the fun thing about this shot though is you talk to producers talking about it, it's Ben Affleck who made the movie. They actually forced them to have a real phone call. So they put a real phone line between these two folks because they wanted to recreate it. And I realized that if ever in life I had to negotiate anything against Viola Davis, I'm out. Like you just take it, just keep it, it's fine. But it's also like profoundly important because those lines are so powerful. They don't let us own anything, which is true, right? And if you think about what Dolores Jordan did, and by the way, it's a composite. This exact scene did not happen. It was but the facts are pretty true that this is eventually what happened. They negotiated a deal where Michael Jordan got a share of every share that's being sold, every shoe that's being sold. And even though it didn't happen exactly like this scene, it eventually happened. This is a powerful telling of it, obviously with two phenomenal actors. And that moment where Dolores Jordan redefined the future of sports sponsorships. Michael Jordan today is one of the wealthiest athletes in the world and probably one of the wealthiest black athletes. He hasn't stepped into a basketball court in probably a couple of decades. And she defined it for every other athlete who came in. The future of sports was redefined because now if you're like a Serena Williams or Aja Wilson, whoever it is, you go and negotiate a deal where you get a cut. And what she really negotiated at that point was 2% of the company, even though that's not worth, his worth is $3 billion, and the company's market capitalization right now is $96 billion. It was, so I've never worn Jordans before, I'm not cool enough to pull it off, but I said, you know what, for this keynote, I'm gonna go get myself a pair because I'm ready for it. So I got myself, thank you. I'm not a cool enough person, right, middle-aged dad. So I go to my local Nike store. I mean, I'm cheap, so I go to the outlet store. And the Jordan line is still the busiest part of the store. It's still where most kids want to go, young people want to go. And the sneaker that I bought for $89, today, 25% of that goes back to the Jordan family. Think about the intergenerational power of that, right? If they had taken the $250,000 sponsorship and said, yeah, that's the greatest sponsorship ever in the history of Nike, we're good, this is not the history we'll be telling today. This person, this family, this woman redefined what ownership can be because she got into the system and started playing the game. She knew how the game worked, and she said, you know what? I know what I'm worth. I'm going to stop playing it. And I'm here in front of you because I have the privilege of being a head of a philanthropic institution. And I stepped into that role a couple of years ago, and our founder, Sam Gary, at that time, he had passed, but he left us with a mandate which said, by 2035, I want you to go away as an institution, which is pretty rare for philanthropic institutions. And he also said, I want you to leave behind such that our assets can perpetuate a lot more beauty and joy in the world. So he said, don't spend down. He never used the word spend down. He said, move the assets from your balance sheet into the community's balance sheet. So I was given this really, thank you, fascinating mandate. And our founder, we're lucky, he was a visionary. He kind of saw the dysfunction in the broader community in terms of what it is. But he also realized something else, which is funny in philanthropy, which is we think we solve problems. The truth is we're really good at managing money. In fact, we're really good pots of money that grow in value while we sleep. Because if you give a few $1 billion and you put it in whatever you can, real estate, public equities, venture, all of it, it just grows in value. We've figured out wealth more than anything else, which is why we have about $1 trillion in assets in this country. In philanthropy, by the way. If you tell an average American there's $1 trillion of money sitting for the benefit of you, they're like, what the heck are you talking about, right? And so our founder said that secret of wealth and ownership is what we want to transition. That's what we want to give them. We want to give them a gift of hacking the system. So we went down this journey of figuring out how do we do that and how do we materially make our strategy of not just to go away, but making ownership as a core aspect of it, partly because we want to leave behind a legacy of wealth. The same way that Dolores Jordan was able to negotiate an intergenerational pathway, we think that every Colorado family, and we're obsessed with Colorado, can have an intergenerational pathway towards wealth. And we put on our matrix hats and said, everywhere we see ownership. How do you shake that tree so that some of that ownership accrues for families we care about the most? And how do you make sure that we're not asking them to wait? We're not saying you have to earn a certain income before you start thinking about wealth. That is not going to happen in America anymore. That dream is lost. I'm sorry to say this. Income is not going to get there. The way the future of wealth is going to be defined is going to be through owning assets in your balance sheet that appreciate in value. Capital income is going to be far more important than wage income, especially with the age of AI. And we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to participate because there's equity everywhere, right? And so if we just pull the slide, Joseph, thank you again. We decided to say in every corner of our structure, there's assets to be held and there's assets to be redistributed. And we would like to define a system where we create ownership as the center of the strategy. And so we call this the ownership pyramid. And what you're seeing in front of you is essentially a set of ways in which you can think about households accruing wealth. And I'll illustrate a couple of specific examples here before we jump in and I close this out. One is just thinking about the fact that there's both real assets, there's also individual financial assets, there's home ownership, which many of you all care about. So back in 2015, our founders saw the power of home ownership, in particular affordable home ownership. And we helped co-create with our colleagues from the Colorado Health Foundation, I know Dr. Bynum's in the room, something called the Elevation Community Land Trust, which is our version of the land trust in Colorado. And Tony may have been accidentally involved in it in some ways. And it's become one of the largest land trusts in the state, probably growing really fast, and we've invested in that idea. But we also saw the opportunity that while land trust focused on affordable home ownership and affordability being the center of it, how do you think about wealth? And in particular, thinking about wealth in the Black community, where home ownership is a core, deep, loved value that they hold on to, and yet our Black home ownership rates are 30% lower than white home ownership rates anywhere in the country, and it's still there today. So we created something called the Deerfield Fund for Black Wealth. It's a down payment assistance program that directly supports Black families into buying homes. And in many cases, the buying homes in market rates where they're saying that we want to not just have a home, we want to participate in the wealth appreciation. We want to have our version of what Michael Jordan had, which is why should we sit around and leave value at the table? We're worth having wealth in our balance sheet. And today that fund has created about 20 million of net worth for the Black community within 2.5 years. Robert Wood Johnson was an early investor. Thank you all for coming on and believing in us. So, but those are table stakes, right? I will say, once we saw the magic of that, we started seeing ownership everywhere. So we said multifamily, right? Renters pay the value of that property, and yet when you walk away from renting an apartment for 5, 10, 2, 3 years, you're not getting any upside at all. So we decided to experiment with this idea of renter wealth building. We started working with Enterprise, and they have something called a renter wealth fund. And the crazy thing we did was, with those early experiments, in 2022, we were running a statewide legislation to make affordable housing broader in Colorado by unlocking state funding. Not federal funding, state funding. And this was going to unlock about $300 million of affordable housing financing in the form of equity, concessionary equity, and debt dollars. We said, what if we put in ownership into that? What if we said every renter who lives in a property that is financed by this fund should get a share of the upside? And you know what? The state can let go of their returns. They can just preserve their capital. Why don't we take all the returns that get generated from the investment they do into these properties and plow it back into the hands of renters? And so this is really live. The state is putting in about $100 to $150 million every year into affordable housing financing. There are new units being created. And as a renter in those units, they're getting value accrued, which we think can be anywhere between $10,000 and $50,000 in the next 5 years. It's possible, right? Because it's the same game that you play with a real estate investment trust. You just share some of that equity with folks that are creating deep amount of value. And to me, this is the foundation of what we're building. And I think when we go away in 2035, our institution leaves behind this legacy of wealth that we've benefited from. I want to reflect for a moment and just say that it is strange that I'm standing here and preaching about the benefits of ownership. And I'm also like asking you all to reimagine American ownership for a couple of reasons. One, I'm as little American as you can be. I know it's not hard to tell with my accent, mostly because, believe me, I learned mostly speaking English by watching American TV. Spent a lot of it, including movies like The Matrix. So my accent is kind of like pretty American is what I've been told. But I didn't get on a plane until I was 25. I grew up in India, and I became a citizen a year and a half ago. So I'm pretty new. Thank you. I got in just in time. I will say my passport did not come with a return policy, so I am stuck. But I appreciate it. I love this place. So yeah, like, you know, I'm new. The second reason is because I didn't grow up with wealth. This journey around ownership and wealth creation, I can stay here and talk about it. Of course, I have privilege now because of my job and all that, but I didn't. And in fact, I think I was raised by a single parent, and often my mom was in a situation where assets was not even in the question because her priority was food on the table and making sure that we had rent to pay, right? Like it was not, we were negative balance sheet for most of my lifetime. And in 2021, I bought my first home. Until then, the largest asset I had owned was a used Kia, which was worth $12,000. Now you know how cheap I am. This home was worth $800,000. I was losing my sleep because I was like, wait, this is crazy. Turns out you could just go in and the US government is gonna back you and give you 5x leverage to go buy an asset. I was like, nobody told me that, right? And once we bought the home, and my daughter was 6 or 7 at that time, and my mom was visiting, and she was playing out in our yard. We live in Denver, the street's beautiful. And my mom was sitting next to me, and she had a few tears in her eyes. And I was a little surprised. It was the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday. What's going on, right, moms? And she momentarily said, you know, I just couldn't imagine that this would be true because between the age of 0 and 10, we had lived in about 12 different homes. And so the idea of like having that beauty of joy of having a place where my daughter can call it home, and that's when it struck me that this conversation around intergenerational wealth is actually about intergenerational trauma. Right? It's about the idea that when we want to imagine a better life for our kids, what I was able to do with my privilege was to make sure my daughter doesn't have to worry about where she's going to sleep, doesn't have to worry about where she's going to feel safe. And she's got a parent who goes to bed not worrying about how he was going to pay the bills or whether it's going to be a medical emergency and we're going to be out of our homes again or how we're going to put food on the table. That peace of mind is priceless. And as we think about our own communities, we come from places as individuals or probably our own communities that carry not just intergenerational trauma, but hundreds of years of trauma. And to me, the conversation around wealth is about healing some of it. It's about acknowledging the worth that families have and giving them a grounding that's not just about a home they can afford, but it's about a safety net they can live and appreciate and value that they can see in their kids. And that connection between wealth and trauma is really important for us in this moment. Because it does feel overwhelming, it does feel hopeless, it does feel hard. But I'll tell you, when I was in that citizenship room with the ceremony happening with 40 other families from all around the world, I think 18 different countries, I'd never seen a place with more hope in my life. People had absolutely no questions that this is the future they wanted, and this is the place they wanted to be. And they knew that there could be a president that could ostracize them and talk badly about immigrants but kick them out of the country. They knew that the politics could go either way, but we still stood our ground and said, this is a place of hope that we want to be, and nowhere else would we find this hope. And to me, that connection comes from an eagerness to participate in the prosperity that's being generated in this country, the wealthiest nation in the world, right? And that idea of connection between wealth and the American dream, to me, is profound. As a newbie, I can see the American dream more clearly because I got here for it, and it's part of the dream. And I would want you all to just join me in this moment because this is the largest group of community-oriented landowners in the country. If anybody could start this movement of thinking about land as a place of wealth, it's people in this room. And I really, really welcome you to join me in this moment and join this movement. Thank you so much. I don't have any more movie clips to play. I'm sorry.
Oh, well. Oh, there we go. Thank you back there. We're going to have a little bit of Q&A, and I believe you all have the ability to submit questions. Is that via the conference app? Yeah, I get the thumbs up. See, I need a team. I don't know what I'm doing. So if you all go on to that little barcode there and submit your questions, they're going to be collated. But I do have some questions to start us off. And Santhosh, thank you again for a very compelling and thought-provoking and participatory presentation, conversation. I happen to know that you really typically frame your work around the ownership economy as a movement. So can you tell us what prompted you to call it a movement, and why is that helpful and necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word movement comes a little bit naturally to me. And part of my story is that I grew up in a little Gandhian university, and the place was founded on the values of Mahatma Gandhi. And in fact, it was a small little tiny university town where one of the visitors in the 60s that came here, which was shocking when I found out because I had to research the Stanford archives to find this, was Martin Luther King Jr. And the place that he came is called the Martin Luther King Jr. Hall even today. And so this is the tiny university town I grew up in. So I grew up among activists. I mean, the fact that I deal with money now is a misnomer, right? I mean, I'm like, this is random. But, and so to me, the idea of change really doesn't come from capital, it comes from people. And so the reason we call it a movement is really to say, once we are able to see the power of what ownership can be, and once we are able to look into the matrix and see that no matter where we go, we can't escape this reality. Anything that is a piece of property in this country is going to be pieced out and owned and sold. That how do we get everybody to participate in that requires us to collectively reimagine this future. So it doesn't matter what side of the ecosystem folks in the room are, or it doesn't matter where you are in the housing ecosystem. It's a welcoming act to say collectively we do need to redefine our racial struggle, our reimagining of justice in this country. When we talk about economic justice, it is about wealth justice, and that's the movement we're trying to build.
Thank you. I know you and I have talked about this one-on-one, and we both share a commitment to racial equity, but how's that reflected in the work that you're doing at Gary?
Yeah, I think it's fundamental to what we are, and we still stand that ground. We haven't changed any of the work we do, and the Deerfield Fund for Black Wealth is still called the Deerfield Fund for Black Wealth. Even though, as you all know, in your own communities and the work that you all do, there is an incredible amount of fear that's perpetrated, and we don't know what is real and what is not, right? Some of it is perceived fear, some of it is real fear, there's real attacks, obviously. And that in itself is the instrument that is being used, because it's like, if we can get people in a place of fear, we would do things that are unexpected of us. And that's a human reaction, especially if you have history of trauma. And so what we've committed ourselves to do is to focus on the communities. So less on the rhetoric, less on the statements on our websites, but how do we make sure that whenever we talk about racial justice, that it particularly means something meaningful and real for communities of color. And so the Deerfield Fund for Black Wealth is an example of it, where we're explicitly making sure that you can only apply and participate in the program if you're Black or African American, and that is a prerequisite based on existing law that is still the law in this country, which is about preferential treatment for those that are being treated unjust. So none of that has changed. We're sticking to that structure, and I think what we need to do is continue that fight, partly because I feel like it's easy for us to relent from it, and I will say that a lot of the promises that came off, and I know we're sitting in the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and it's literally last week. And one of my challenges is there were lots of statements and a lot of apprehension in terms of what would change, but for communities of color, not a lot has changed. So we've kind of not kept that promise, right? So it's all about action in communities, to going back and saying, how do we build solutions that meaningfully changes their life circumstance, and to us, it meaningfully changes their balance sheet and their households. That's how you show justice. Economic justice is to show that, hey, we've got you, You don't have to worry about it. Here's an asset that you can appreciate and value. Here's a home. And I know you all are doing that through the broader housing movement, but I think that's important for us.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to take one of the questions that was submitted here, which says, what strategies have proven effective in building lender confidence and participation in financing CLT housing? And I'm going to change that a little bit because I know you mentioned it. You all have been investing in supporting elevation and shared equity housing approaches. So what's the strategy? How are you making those decisions about investments?
Yeah, and I think I'm not a CLT expert,
Right.
so if I am, I feel like I'm in a room full of incredibly smart people, way smarter than me on this topic. From a philanthropic institution standpoint, we think that the simplest thing that foundations can do when they have assets in their balance sheet is to de-risk the assets of the CLT. And so I think our folks at the Colorado Foundation, again, and other investors in Colorado came together and created a $15 million balance sheet to start off with. As a starter CLT, that's a pretty healthy place to start. And they were able to then go ahead and leverage and borrow against it. And the local banks felt the names that were behind this institution were reputable enough that they started to lend to them and lend to their borrowers who are buying homes through the CLT. So I feel like we have community foundations and local foundations in every community. The challenge is their balance sheets are not seen as an extension of the community's balance sheet. They're seen as this little secret thing that they keep, and they tell you when they can come and take a little bit of money out of it. We got to question that. We got to say, well, why don't you borrow some of the power of your incredible balance sheet and help create community wealth? And that's the movement I think helps de-risk the sector, because the banking lenders are going to do what they're going to do, right? They have their underwriting guidelines. They're not going to suddenly warm and become beautiful heart people. I love many of them, and I'm not dissing the bankers in the room, sorry. I'm just saying that capital markets behave in a way, but they behave very simplistic because they behave with incentives. And so if you say, here's a bunch of money to de-risk this deal, I know you guys wouldn't do a CLT deal before, but help you see the power of what it is, then they would come in and join the club because that is what they would want to do because that's what they're prescribed to do.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to ask you is, as a funder, most funders, the vast majority of them, foundations, shy away from direct support of policy work, but you all lean into that and you support it. Why do you do that?
Policy is where it's at, right? I mean, I think we were discussing this in a smaller workshop we're in, where we were saying, I was making a statement more broadly, and I'm curious what the group thinks is that there is no single piece of housing that doesn't exist with a combination of policy and federal or local dollars and private dollars. Any piece of housing or any piece of real estate you think about, there's literally, those two are the biggest factors that kind of draw in the capital. And the more affordable we get, the more important it is for us to think about the role of subsidies more broadly, federally and locally. We are lucky. We have an innovative structure that enables us to both do philanthropic work, but also we have a separate policy arm that can do direct advocacy and policy work. But the realization we had about 3 years ago was to say housing as an asset is not going to be solved by philanthropy alone. And philanthropy is an instigator, it's a catalyst, we can create new solutions, but the scale of the challenge, even though we're pretty big in terms of our balance sheet, requires really the public actors and the private actors to come together. We need private capital to furnish a lot of it, whether it's a senior lender or a mezz lender, and we need innovative financing from public institutions in order to make sure that it is affordable and not extractive. And so our work in policy is about how do you get that dance to happen, which is really fun, but it's also incredibly challenging because we really have to reimagine how we think about subsidies in this ecosystem. I know I'm not answering your question, but overall I feel like to the extent where we're able to, especially at this moment, advocate locally at the state and local level to think about their role in housing more broadly, I think we have a dramatic opportunity in front of us.
Great. Also, are you having conversation with other funders about policy as a priority for collective funding?
We are. There's limitations around how you could do that because of C3 regulation and advocacy rules. As much as possible, we're bringing others along. And there's two levels of policy, right? And there's a level of policy where you can be directly an advocacy organization running legislation, advocating for stuff. And then there is a level of policy which is around how do you build movements and coalitions and voices that we care about. And I think we just need everybody to be participating in that entire spectrum.
Absolutely. You also have been talking about this idea of philanthropic impermanence, sort of the sunset scenario that your own organization has already implemented. How does that inform your decision-making about particular investments or grants that you're making?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of who we are. And I joked that I get to hang out with other CEOs that are all going away. We're not dying. The organizations that we care about are all have a time limitation. And we would get together and we would be like a weird tiny group, right? Like it's small. We're not the mainstream of the philanthropic sector. And that all changed 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when the Gates Foundation said they're going to sunset in 2045, right? The world's largest foundation said, we're out. And so now I think this is really, I think, a snowball effect. We feel like a lot of new generation of wealth holders are increasingly questioning the idea of perpetuity. And I'll say why this is absurd is because when your goal is to persist as an organization forever, that's the God you worship. That becomes the fundamental nature of how you build the institution, because then you are rightfully so interested in protecting the assets, growing the value of the assets, as against doing the most radical thing you could do right now to solve the toughest problems. So we are lucky, and again, I'm privileged because I get to run this organization that does talk about impermanence, and our founder is. So it's definitely made us clearer. We're very clear what we want to get done in the next 10 years. And the second biggest thing that has made us understand is the fact that we want to leave behind a world that's far more beautiful and far more profoundly impactful for communities, which means it's really thinking about the systems we want to impact that affects kids and families in Colorado, but primarily also about wealth and how do we make sure our endowment can become a force multiplier for community wealth. And we are reimagining a world, Tony, where every Coloradan has not just a minimum wage, but a minimum wealth. And that's the dream we want to get to.
I'm going to take one of the audience questions that says, is the ownership movement compatible with the movement to decommodify housing, and how do they work together?
It's a good one. I think it's probably, just fully honest, it's not probably directly compatible. The ownership movement does believe that there are underlying structures of equity that exist everywhere. It does believe that equity appreciates in value, which means that we're not going back to the core principles of collectively decommodified housing. And we're leveraging the game and playing the game. And again, not to use a Matrix analogy again, but for those of you that watched the movie, the climax of the movie, the way Keanu Reeves defeats the bad guys, is that he sees the Matrix. And he's like, oh, you know what? I know what game I'm playing right now. I'm going to use the game against you guys, and starts to move things around, like bullets and stuff. It's pretty cool. Strongly recommend it. But the underlying idea here is we've decided that it's important to play the game. And if you all think it's not important to play the game, I honor it, I respect it. I think we should decommodify housing to the extent we can. But to the extent we choose to play the game, let's play the game well. Let's give people a fair chance. And so when we created the Deerfield Fund, we said, Black families came to us and said, look, we're tired of being in deed-restricted housing. We want to see we've seen how much wealth our peers are creating here, especially white folks, and we want to participate in that. So, and then we did rightfully get pushback to say, you all are participating in making housing more commodified. And we said, yes, but let's give people a fair chance to play the game. So I will say it is a really healthy conflict and an understanding of where we choose to disagree, but let's not make disagreement the reason why we don't work together on this, and we have to figure out ways to keep moving forward.
Yes. So, everybody in this room who knows me well knows I'm about sort of getting to an outcome, like let's set a goal, let's work, let's measure our progress, let's get there. So tell us, in your opinion, what does success in achieving the ownership economy look like? And practically speaking about housing opportunities, do you think we could see a real change in this country in 10, 15, 30 years' time if we succeeded in creating systemic change?
I think we can. And we owe it to communities more than now, for people we care about, to be hopeful. And I also say that because I feel like this is a moment for us to coalesce around action. When things look really scary is when you can put your head down and really focus on outcomes. And to me, the reality is that we want to imagine a nation which is the wealthiest in the world, where every family has a basic pool of assets that can support them when they need to and appreciates in value. And that number, we think, could be around $50,000 of wealth in every balance sheet, and that's not crazy to think of. It's actually not that crazy at all if you think about the amount of wealth that is in this country, just to be honest with you. But yet, most households today don't have $2,000 of savings to pay for things that they can care about if things go wrong. And housing's a really critical path to get there. Because I think about Americans with less than $100,000 of net worth, about 80% of their comes from their primary residence. And so for us to reimagine the housing community as not just pushing towards greater affordability, but also pushing towards providing a safety net, one obviously is to increase dramatically access to homeownership, including through affordable homeownership as a starting place for folks in the lower AMIs, and then getting them into more starter homes, creating more supply in our communities, creating more supportive homeownership programs that make it affordable for people to get into homes when they're a first-time home buyer. And then there's also other ways of thinking about rental housing and other places where ownership exists, where we take a tiny sliver of it and share it with people who are creating value there. So I don't think it's unimaginable at all. We think Colorado can be an example. I will say this legislative session, our team led an effort with a bunch of coalition partners to create a first ever teacher home ownership program in the state of Colorado. And at the time when housing funds are completely drying apart, this is going to be a $200 million program to support teachers to buy homes in their own communities and their neighborhoods. And it's a down payment assistance tool to support them so that they can get into these homes. So there's ways to get there in multiple approaches, and we just need to keep fighting for this belief that a home is a place of love, it's a place of healing, and it's a place of wealth.
Thank you. I'm gonna take that as an opportunity to close us out. And Santhosh, I just want to say, I think you got the makings of a really great roadshow here that can really inspire and change some of the conversations. So I look forward to seeing you out there promoting the ownership economy, and you can count on us to be your allies in that. But again, everybody here in the room, help me thank Santhosh for. Thank you. All right, that concludes us. And Dave, are you coming up here to kind of give a little instruction to folks about what's coming up next? I hope.
Very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not even going to attempt to follow that. Can we have another round of applause, please, for Santhosh Ramdoss? My name's Dave Smith. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Grounded Solutions Network. Some of the more linguistically astute amongst you might have realized already that I'm not actually from DC myself. 15 years ago, I had the absolute privilege of going to what was then the National CLT Network Conference in Albuquerque in New Mexico, where I met a lifelong friend in Tony Pickett. And 15 years later, it's been the absolute privilege of my professional life to organize this conference for you all this week. So I want to extend my own personal huge thanks for you all for being here. We have overrun very slightly this morning, but I think you'll agree it was thoroughly worthwhile. I just have a few small announcements. The first one is you have a break now until 1:30, at which the breakout sessions will start. We'd encourage you, please, all to go and meet our friends in the exhibition hall, which is behind you, to talk to them, let them, this is a British term, flog you their wares and take an interest in what they're talking about. If you haven't already, please download the conference map, which we have got. It is on the app, and there's a whole wealth of information there. And just finally, I wanted to plug this evening's conference reception, which is in here at 5:30. I've bought a huge amount of Prosecco, and whilst I am willing to drink it all myself, it would be great to see a few of you here. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you to Tony and Santhosh.